What's up, everybody? It's Alex Leak and Friends NFL podcast back for another week. I'm your host, Alex Leak, and we have a special guest on the show, Erik Coleman. For those of you that don't know, Erik is a former All Pac-10 safety for the Washington Cougars and 9-year NFL safety for the Jets, Falcons, and Lions. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Erik.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Alex, man. We've been going back and forth. I'm glad we got to catch up.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you on, and it's cool to get to talk some football with you. Let's start at the beginning. You attended Lewis and Clark High School in Spokane, Washington, correct?
Yeah. I'm a Tiger.
Nice.
Yeah, came from Spokane. I was born in Sacramento, grew up in Spokane. Man, it was a great place to grow up and be a kid.
That's cool. Then you were really good in high school. You earned letters, 3 letters in football, playing multiple positions: running back, defensive back, and kick returner. And you also earned 3 letters in basketball. What was that deciding factor? Did you enjoy playing basketball just as much as football, and which one did you like more?
That's a great question. I actually, I love basketball. That was my passion. Playing hoop was one of my favorite things to do. But, I was explosive, but I stopped growing at like 5'11", where I could still, I was still an explosive player. It was just, football was one of those things that was just natural to me. I started as a junior. I started receiving letters from different colleges asking me to come check out their university for football, and I was like, okay, I guess football is going to be the way to go. You know what I mean? I had scholarship offers and things like that. So, down went my basketball dreams, and then I dove right into football, which has been a blessing.
Now you were a ball hawk on defense, leading your school in interceptions as well as rushing for over 1,000 yards your senior year. Do you ever look back and think like maybe in another life you could have been a college or NFL running back?
Yeah, I definitely could have been. I got recruited, schools like Oregon State, Montana. There's a handful of schools that were actually recruiting me as a running back, and I remember taking a trip to Oregon State, and that's when Chad Johnson and T.J. Hushmanzada were there, and they had that team that had just beat Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. It was that year, and I remember looking at the defense and seeing I think it was Lawrence Grant. They had a bunch of guys on their defense that were just huge. And I said to myself, I'm like a 170-pound high school kid. I said, I'm going to be on their side of the ball. I don't want to be running the ball and getting hit by those guys. So that trip kind of made the decision for me.
That's cool. That's a great story. And then, so you stay close to home, choosing to go to Washington State and Pullman. What was that college recruitment experience like and deciding to stay home?
Well, it was so that was during a tough time in my life. My mom was actually in prison. I was living with friends, and going to my recruiting trips by myself, and going around to different schools. When I got to Washington State, when I got to Pullman, it was instant, like it was a perfect match. It was a family atmosphere. I had got along with a lot of the guys. They seemed to be all in the same have the same mindset. It was a small town. I think this town is 35,000 people, and 28,000 of them were students. So, it was a big college town, and I wanted to be around that family atmosphere. So, perfect fit for me. Great team, that I walked into, and a lot of good mentors.
That's very cool. And then you would play, 4 years for the Washington Cougars from 2000 to 2003. You were fortunate enough to play on some very good teams in Pullman, winning 10 games in 3 of your 4 years there. Some very talented teammates. You had corners Marcus Trufant and Jason David on those teams. What was it like playing with those great corners?
Oh man, it was awesome. I was definitely blessed to have that luxury of having good corners, and even when I was coming up to learn from a great safety in Lamont Thompson, who still is the all-time Pac-12 leader in interceptions. So, I had a great group of guys. We pushed each other. We got better. We demanded greatness out of one another. And, it was pretty cool to see how many guys out of my secondary, younger and older, and within my age range that went to the NFL and got drafted. We really did produce quite a few DBs. And, to see those guys' success and and to see what we did on the field was great.
Yeah, and then you guys had a lot of success during your time on the team. The Cougars would win 2 bowl games, the Sun Bowl and the Holiday Bowl. What do you remember some of like the best games that you remember being a part of with Washington State?
That's a great question. We had, my junior year, we were co-Pac-10 champions with USC, and they had a squad, man. It seemed like they just had running back, they had a stable of running backs. Carson Palmer was playing quarterback, a ton of talent, explosive receivers, and we were both, great teams. And in Pullman, I want to say it was in November, we ended up beating them in double overtime on a field goal, man. And that was, all the fans rushed the field. It was a great moment. But, so that was obviously one of my better memories that year. And then that same year, we went down to UCLA and kind of to seal the deal for that Pac-10 championship. We beat UCLA at home and figured out that we were, later going to come and play in the Rose Bowl game against Oklahoma. So that was fun. I had a ton of great experiences. My last game that I ever played in college was against number 5 ranked Texas. They had Vince Young and Cedric Benson and Roy Williams and, Bo Scaife, a bunch of great players on the team. And I think we were ranked 11th, and we upset them. We played very well. It was a physical game. But I think that was probably – that game right there was probably the reason I got drafted.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, you had a great career there, recorded 12 interceptions for Washington State, 3 defensive touchdowns, and took home all Pac-10 honors. In 2004, you would enter the NFL draft and be selected in the 5th round, picked number 143 overall by the New York Jets. What was your draft experience like? Did you expect to go earlier, or were you just happy to go in the draft?
No, for me, I was, coming out, I had a mid to late round grade on me. And,
Okay.
for that reason, I had a tough time finding an agent. All these guys, I got invited to the combine, and, a lot of guys who I knew were getting recruited by agents, and they were telling them, I'll pay for your training and things like that. And I didn't have anyone to pay for my training. So I remember calling up Thomas Weatherspoon at Pepper Sports down in Alameda, California. And I said, Thomas, I don't have any money. I said, but, I'm a hard worker, and if I make it to the NFL, I'll pay you back. And he said, I believe in you. Come on down. So I made my way down there, started grinding. I actually, during that time, I found an agent who paid for my training. And, I just had that mindset that I had to go get it. Draft day comes around. When I was drafted, it was 2 days of the draft. 1 through 3 was on Saturday. Rounds 4 through 7 were on Sunday. And I knew I wasn't going to get drafted the first day. And, I was hoping that I would get, woke up by a phone call from a team on Sunday morning telling me I got drafted, but I didn't. I was at my grandmother's house by myself, and my mom was at her house, and she had a party at the house, which I wanted no parts of because I didn't know if I was going to get drafted or not. And I remember watching like round 4 and seeing guys get picked and, being happy for guys, but at the same time being like, man, when is it my turn? Yeah. And round 4 went off. Went from ESPN to ESPN2, and my grandmother didn't have ESPN2. So I was kind of like in the dark. And then I got a phone call from a New York area code. It was someone from the Jets and said, if the Falcons don't pick you with this pick, then we're going to draft you. And, how would you like to be a Jet? And I was like, I would love it, Yeah. And so that day, man, that day changed my life forever. It was an emotional day for me and my family, to understand where I had come from. And, the fact that I was getting the opportunity to play in the NFL was an amazing feeling.
Yeah, that's awesome. I heard you say something about in a different interview talking about going from small town Pullman in Washington to the big city of New York and to go to the Jets. Were you a little nervous or have some thoughts about that when you first were going out there?
Oh, man. Yeah, I had never been on the East Coast. I'm a West Coast boy, so I had never been on the East Coast before. And, to get drafted to New York, I was like, man, I'm gonna land. I don't know where I'm gonna live, like in a sky, in a skyscraper, because I thought New York was all skyscrapers. And I landed on Long Island. Our facility was in the suburbs in Long Island at Hofstra, and I remember just seeing a bunch of trees, and I didn't know how green New York was. And it was definitely a culture shock for me, to see that many people and to see, the different ethnicities, the cultures, the way people spoke, it was all fast, it was on the go. And I come from I come from Spokane, Washington, coming from Pullman, it's very, it's a farm town, it's country. And so going to the big city, it was a big shock for me. It was hard to get used to. I used to hate it, my first couple of years. When the season would end, I'd be one of the first guys out on a plane going back home to Washington. So, but I learned to love it. I found the love of my life in New York, my wife, and we live in New York to this day.
That's awesome. That's a great, job of overcoming that and getting used to it. And what helped was your play. When you first got there on the Jets, a 5th round pick, safety coming in, and you earn the start week 1. And then you make the game-winning play in week 1, the interception off of Carson Palmer in his first start. Tell me about that, what you remember from your first start, your first game, and just an incredible game.
Yeah, man, that was a special moment, knowing that I was going to be the starter, coming into the MetLife Stadium and seeing 70,000 people and, just being in New York and, the Jets flew over the stadium during the national anthem. It was a really emotional time for me. And, to be able to play against those players, it was tough. And I remember, there was the game went well. I was making tackles, I was making my calls, I was getting comfortable into my groove. And we get into the fourth quarter, and there's like 4 minutes left. And I believe we were up 2 touchdowns. I was covering Chad Johnson in the slot, playing my coverage, and we're on the 50-yard line. I remember he went deep, and I was running with him, and I was like, man, I'm stride for stride with him. The ball's in the air. Let's go get it. And I'm looking, and the ball's in the air, and I'm like, man, let me go get this thing. And at the last second, he just dove in front of me and caught it, landed in the end zone, and it was a touchdown. And it broke my heart, man.
Yeah.
I really thought I had let my teammates down. I thought I let the city down. It was my first game, so my first game as a pro. So I hadn't really faced that kind of, in college, no one was doing that to me. And so, my teammates picked me up on the sideline, told me to pick my head up, and I did. Came down the next series, and we were up a touchdown. They look around the field. It's like, who are they going to attack when they need it? This veteran over here or this rookie who just gave up a touchdown, and they went after me again on a corner route. I jumped it, got the interception, and sealed the deal for the victory. And it was it was a great moment. It was kind of like solidified my confidence in knowing that I can play at this level and I can make an impact in the NFL.
Yeah, and then the very next week you would intercept a pass from Drew Brees, and making those plays early on had to really instill trust in the coaching staff and in your teammates to give you more playing time and all that.
Absolutely. I was always big on knowing and doing my job, and I wasn't the most athletic, I wasn't the biggest guy, but I always knew my job, and I knew, I studied hard, and I knew my keys. I knew what to expect from the offense. So, whether you're bigger or faster than me, you diagnose a play. I'm looking at my keys. I'm looking at the right thing. Chances are I'm going to get there before you. So it doesn't really matter how fast you are. And then that's what, allowed me to play 9 years in the league is, up here. I studied hard. I played hard with a lot of heart. And, I just always gave all out effort. So, I'm very fortunate for the opportunity from Herm Edwards and Donnie Henderson and all the veterans that I played with, that they had the confidence in me to play. And it was an opportunity that I wasn't going to let go.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Herm Edwards and that Jets team, did you have a good time playing for Herm Edwards? Was he a good coach for you?
Oh, I loved Herm. Herm was probably my favorite coach to play for.
Nice.
He was a guy who was, he was great with the X's and O's. He's a player. So he's a player's coach. He understands the game, and he, understands that part of it. But he was very having you develop as a man was just as important. And having you be responsible off the field and being a good husband, being a good father was just as important as you being a good player to Herm. So I always appreciate Herm and respect him for that. Helping me develop into a man. I was 21 years old when I got drafted. I grew up in New York, pretty much, out there on my own for my first time. And, playing for Herm was a great experience. I wish I would have had more time with him. I played with him for 2 years. And it was a great 2 years for me.
That's cool. And then you had a great rookie year. You started all 16 games, 100 tackles, 4 4 interceptions, 2 sacks. The Jets would go 10-6 and make the playoffs and play at the San Diego Chargers. You remember this game? You recorded 7 tackles and a pass breakup. Crazy game against the Chargers that year in the wild card.
Yeah, that was nuts, and that was the second time we had played the Chargers that year. I mean, and they were loaded. You know, they had LaDainian Tomlinson, obviously. I think that was the second or third year in the league. Antonio Gates was at his peak. Drew Brees obviously was the quarterback. So they're a very good team. It was a physical game. I think it came down to a missed field goal from Kading, who was like a Pro Bowl kicker that year, and just happened to miss a field goal at the right time and helped us get to the next level. So that was a big victory for us.
That's very cool. Then in 2005, the Jets would struggle, go 4-12, and miss the playoffs. You would again start all 16 games, record 121 tackles, 2 picks. What was it like that year and they struggled? Was it difficult being in the big city and having a tough year? Is that tough on players that wear on you?
Yeah, it is. It is tough. Being in New York is the media capital of the world. So when you win, it's big, and everybody knows about it. But, when you lose, it's the same thing. Everybody knows about it. And the thing about the New York Jets fans is that they're some of the most, everyone says they have passionate fans. But, I mean, it takes a certain kind of passion to stick with a team who, listen, it's been like 51 years since they went to the Super Bowl. So, they definitely love their Jets. They have a lot of pride for their team. And when you're doing bad, they're going to show up, but they're going to boo you. They're going to let you know about yourself. And so for that year for us, having high expectations coming into the season, having all of our players return from the last year, and then, boom, our quarterback goes down. Boom, our second string quarterback goes down. We had so many injuries that year that it really crippled us. I think we ended up signing Vinny Testaverde, who had been retired for a couple of years, and he came in and won some games for us. But it was it was a tough year. It was definitely a big change from having the success the previous year.
Then, a rarity at the end of that year is the Jets trading head coach Herm Edwards to the Chiefs. I mean, you rarely see that. And what was it like being a player and hearing that your head coach just got traded?
It was frustrating. I had dealt with my head coach leaving in college. Coach Price went to Alabama when I was there, but to have Herm leave, it was frustrating. Especially because of the relationship I had with Herm and understanding that my D coordinator was leaving, my position coach was leaving, and just to see the business side of the game was tough.
Yeah.
That's when it gets real for you. When you see that business side, guys, you don't produce 1 year and it's done for you. So it's it was a tough scenario, but it is what it is. It's a part of the game, and it was another lesson for me to learn.
Absolutely. And then 2006, the Jets go with head coach Eric Mangini, first-time coach. They would bounce back and go 10-6 and make the playoffs. You would play in all 16 games, recording 101 tackles and an interception. In the wild card game against the New England Patriots in Foxborough, you record 10 tackles, but the Patriots pull away late. Tell me what it's like going into Foxborough in January against prime GOAT Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. That's got to be, talk about a tough task.
Yeah, it was. It was a tough task, and it was especially tough because that year during the season, we had beat them up in Foxborough. That was my first time beating the Patriots. So that was a big opportunity for us, and I think that we surprised them the first time. When we beat them, we had a different package. Our defense was changed up. We just had a mentality, with Eric Mangini coming over, that we just, we had always looked up to the Patriots and they were kind of like the big brother of the conference. But when Mangini came over, it was like he instilled this confidence in us that we knew we can go out and beat them. And that second time around, the third time around actually in the wild card game, they were ready for us. They had us schemed up. They executed better than us. And you know what? The moment didn't get too big for them. New England is one of those organizations where you're not going to see them making mistakes during the game, and they didn't, and we did, and it showed in the score. I think they went on to have a lot of success that year, but is another lesson learned, man. A great experience going to the playoffs. That playoff football is next level. It definitely turns it up a notch when you get to the playoffs, and especially playing up in Foxborough where they won a couple of Super Bowls.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that, Bill Belichick and his coaching and all that, are you looking forward to seeing Cam Newton and Bill Belichick work together this year?
I am.
Yeah.
I am. I'm happy. I'm happy for Cam. That he got another opportunity. I thought it was, it was crazy how long it took, and it was also crazy how much money he got for it. But you know what? Cam's one of those guys who's resilient. He's the MVP of this league, and I think a lot of people forget about that. But I've had the chance to play against him. He's a fierce competitor. One of the biggest dudes, most athletic guys that you'll play against, and he's going to have his career is going to. This is just going to be a pit stop. Whether it's he gets extended and stays in New England or moves on to another team. This is going to be one of those years that Cam sets the tone and shows the world that he is the star that he's been in the past. So I'm really excited for him. I'm also excited for Tom Brady down in Tampa. Him and Gronkowski going down to Tampa. Todd Bowles is down there. I have a ton of respect for Coach Bowles. And Coach Arians down there, man. Coach Arians is one of those guys that everyone wishes they could play for. So, it's going to be a good, I can't wait for the season to start, so we can take away from all this craziness that's going on and just get back to playing ball.
Yeah, something normal and some sports on the TV.
Yep.
I was watching some baseball, like Cubs versus Cubs the other day, just to watch something.
Yep.
Then in 2008, you would leave New York and sign with the Atlanta Falcons. What was it like moving cities in the middle of your career? A lot of times people don't talk about players having to get up and rearrange their lives and move across the country. How difficult was that for you going to Atlanta?
Well, you know what? It was for me at the time. My last year it was tough with Eric Mangini and not being like that full-time starter that year. It was a tough year for me. So going to Atlanta was a breath of fresh air for me.
Nice.
It was a new organization. They had got a new general manager, new head coach. They drafted Matt Ryan that year. For me to come into that was a blessing. It was a lot of things new for me as well. I just got married to my wife. We had our first baby on the way. There was it was a new beginning for me, and going down there to have the success as early as we did that first year was amazing. We got off to a great start, made it to the playoffs that year, and really shocked a lot of people. At the beginning of my time there, you would go into the stadium and look in the upper deck and it would be empty. By the end of the year, the stadium was rocking, everybody was behind us, and we had kind of reestablished ourselves in Atlanta.
That's very cool. Yeah, you were a big part of that, joining that team and helping them rebound after, losing their identity there for a year or two. That was big. And they would go 11-5, make the playoffs. You would be in the wild card round against the Cardinals against another Hall of Fame quarterback in Kurt Warner. You'd record 8 tackles in the game. A question on that. I mean, you were going against some of the best talents at quarterback the game's ever seen. Us fans watch or play Madden and, only see it from a certain perspective. But what's it like for you game planning, preparing to go up against a Hall of Fame quarterback?
Man, it's tough. It's very challenging because, you have to be clicking on all cylinders. Going into the game that communication is at a premium. Technique is going to be at a premium because a guy like Kurt Warner, when you play against these Hall of Fame quarterbacks like Brady, Warner, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, their anticipation is next level. It's not going to be one of those situations where, you make a break on the ball and you look up and the ball's there. Like somebody has to make a real mistake for them to throw an interception. They can throw it into tight windows. They anticipate well. They understand what you're trying to do coverage-wise. We always try to disguise that. And so, playing against Kurt Warner, those moments don't get too big for him. They've been in those moments before, with the Rams, and it was that atmosphere. I've never been in a stadium that loud in my life. I played down in New Orleans on Monday night and in playoff games, but they put the top on that stadium, Phoenix Stadium. Oh my goodness, it was loud, man. I couldn't, my ears are still ringing from it. But Larry Fitzgerald had a great game. I remember Anquan Bolden was balling. It was their time. That was their time. I believe they went to the Super Bowl against the Steelers that year. So we caught them at the wrong time, man.
Yeah. So you'd play all 16 games again in 2009, record 116 tackles, 2 fumbles forced. The Falcons would go 9-7 and just miss the playoffs. And then in 2010, you'd play in 12 games, record 20 tackles. They go 13-3. Talk about that year going 13-3, winning the division, and then going up. You seem to run into some red hot teams, whether it was the Patriots that year, the Cardinals, and then this year, Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. As a Bears fan, I remember watching this game and rooting for you guys because I didn't want to face Green Bay, and I know Green Bay. So, what was that game like? I mean, they were just rolling.
Yeah, that was a tough one, man. Green Bay was they had caught fire, and they always say, the team who gets hot at the right time is going to make that run. And Aaron Rodgers, man, I just remember, being in there in coverage and being into my zone drop and just watch him manipulate us with his eyes and then just throw the ball in there. Just like you can hear the ball coming off his fingers, man. He was, that was a special time in Aaron Rodgers' career. He was invincible right there.
Yeah.
And they ended up winning. We're going on to win the Super Bowl that year, so you can't really be too hard on yourself when the team goes on and wins the Super Bowl. They beat everybody else. So
exactly.
That was a great year. That was my last year in Atlanta, but it was a special year as well.
And then what was the transition going to Detroit in 2011? What was it like? Signing with Detroit.
Well, that was interesting because that was right before the lockout. Is when I signed with Detroit. I'd asked to be released from Atlanta. The lockout was coming. We knew it was coming, and I was like, man, I got to sign somewhere before this lockout. I can't, be locked out and not know where I'm going. And
exactly.
I remember signing in Detroit. It was fun, man. It was a different time in my career. That was a time where I was going to be more, play some special teams, be a mentor, use my playoff experience, all my experiences to help the younger guys, kind of like the last phase of my career. And I went there, played with some really special players, Dominican Sue, Cliff Averill, Calvin Johnson, Nate Burleson, Matt Stafford. There were so many phenomenal players that I got to play with there. It was a really fun team. We went to the playoffs that year. Unfortunately, I broke my leg during the season, and I was on IR. But it was cool to be around those guys and just be in Detroit. Michigan was a place I'd never been. To see the history of the black and blue division. Seeing them play against the Bears, going to New England. Going to Green Bay. Playing against all the Vikings. It was a fun experience for me, especially a great way to end my career.
Very cool. You're talking about going up against Chad Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, Anquan Bolden, Kelvin Johnson. In your mind, who's the best wide receiver, like, out of those? How do you rank receivers? How do you it's tough for fans too, I mean.
Yeah, it's tough to rank those guys, man, because all those guys have their thing that they do so well. Chad, his routes were amazing. Obviously Calvin Johnson was the freak athlete. I mean, he's like 6'6", 240 and can run 4.3, jump, 45 inches in the air, long wingspan, and he was the hardest worker that I've been around. Terrell Owens, he was a beast. He was just like, he catch the ball and stiff arm you, and he was like, that was over. There wasn't no arguing it. But Randy Moss is he was probably the best player that I played against.
Cool.
I remember covering him a couple of times where he put that hand up on me, and I was like, I know what that hand means. And, fortunately for me, the first time he did it, the quarterback got sacked. That's when he was at Oakland, and I was with the Jets. And the next time, I was able to knock one down. I was able to not get mossed and not be a part of his collection of bodies. But he's a special player, man. I played against. I was fortunate. I played against Jerry Rice. I think it was his last year in the league when I was a rookie, and I played against him. And that was my idol growing up, so that was special. I was fortunate. Football has done a lot for me. I got to play against some great players, meet a lot of people, see different parts of the world that I never would have seen. So I'm grateful for the game.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, a hell of a career. 9 years in the not-for-long league, 123 games played, 89 starts, 652 career tackles, 11 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles, and 2 sacks. Looking back on your career, when you like reminisce or think about the good old days or whatever, what do you like to remember, and what did you strive to be like remembered for in the league?
Looking back on my career, I like the best times for me was like the locker room times with the fellas, training, working out together. I remember playing with the Jets, and, that was such a close-knit group. You had guys like Curtis Martin, Wayne Corbett, Kevin Mawai, Eric Barton was my dog, John Abraham. There were so many great players on that team, and it was such a family. I remember after practice, guys would be like, let's go, Rook. And then they'd take me to the restaurant. We go sit around the bar, order, have a couple drinks, order your dinner, and just listen to them tell stories and just learn, and just talk about scenarios that they've been in and experiences. And it was great. I couldn't ask for some better teachers to learn the game from, both on and off the field. So those are some of the memories that I cherish right there. Those special times with your teammates. And me, I want to be remembered as a hard worker, a guy who was, tough as nails, who, always knew, I was a leader. I worked hard. I knew I did my job. I wasn't the flashiest player, but you know what? I was a guy who you can count on, and that's how I'd like to be remembered.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very cool. I'm the same way. Like, that's part of the reason I do these podcasts and I try to get interviews, because like just to be a fly on the wall and hear some of the stories and the battles, it's so cool.
Yeah, it is, man. It's awesome to see.
What are you up to these days, Erik?
So now I'm the vice president of executive benefits at USI Insurance Company. We insure executives, businesses, things like that. Also athletes, we do their disability insurance. So I do that. I host a couple of shows on television and radio for the NFL and for the Jets. And I'm a family man. I'm married. I got 3 kids. I love spending time with my family, and just really I'm a homebody. And I'm not doing the football thing. I'm not doing the work thing. I love just hanging out at the house and enjoying my kids.
That's what's up. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking some time to come on the show. It was awesome to talk some football with you, talk about your career, and it means a lot you coming on, and thanks so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, thank you, and have a great one, Erik.
All right, you too.
All right, peace.